The year is 2095, and space is no longer empty and silent because humans live across many planets now, and they work with alien species, and some of them are peaceful, but some are dangerous, and John is just a normal man among them. John lives on a dusty edge of a colony called Dro 17, where cargo ships come and go, and no one asks questions. And that is why John likes it here, because no one cares about his past, and he does not care about theirs. He works as a cargo pilot and carries supplies between moons and abandoned stations, and most of his time he spends alone in his ship or in a quiet bar, drinking recycled water and watching the news with no interest. One night a strange woman enters the bar, and she is not human, and her skin is soft silver with eyes that glow like blue glass, and everyone looks away. But she walks directly to John's table without fear or hesitation. She sits without asking and looks at him and says, "I need your help, and I will pay you whatever you want." And John blinks and thinks maybe she is joking, or maybe she is lost. But her voice is calm and serious, and her hands shake a little. "What kind of help?" he asks, and the woman says, "My name is Sarah, and I want you to pretend to be the father of my child." John laughs but stops when he sees her face, and she is not smiling, and he says, "Why me?" And she says, "Because you look average and forgettable, and no one will ask questions, and I am being hunted." She places a small chip on the table, and the number on it is large enough to make John stop thinking and start listening, and she says, "I will pay half now and half later, and you just need to say you are the father and stay with me for 1 week." John asks, "Who is after you?" And she says, "Powerful people, and I cannot run anymore, and I need protection, and if they see a human man with me, they will not act so fast because humans still have all eyes in the high council." John leans back and thinks, and his heart says walk away, but his life has been empty and quiet for too long, and something in her eyes says she is not lying, and maybe this is not just about money. He agrees, and she nods, and they leave the bar quietly and walk into the night air, which smells like metal and dust, and she leads him to a small old ship that looks like it hasn't flown in years. They enter, and the lights turn on slowly, and there is a small bed and strange alien plants in pots, and she shows him a file with fake papers that say they are a couple, and he is the father of an unborn baby. She lies down and closes her eyes and says, "We leave in the morning." John tries to sleep on the floor, but his mind is loud with questions. Wakes up to a strange sound, and outside the window, a dark black ship floats silently. And it has no lights and no markings, and his stomach feels cold because it is watching them. And then it disappears like smoke. The next morning they fly out and head toward a quiet moon, and on the way, she stays silent and sometimes holds her stomach and looks worried, and John tries to ask more, but she says only one thing again and again: they cannot find the baby. Ask, "Who are they?" And she says nothing and just looks at the stars, and John feels like he has stepped into something much bigger. Then he understands. They land on the moon and check into a small inn where mixed species stay and act like normal tourists, and for a while it works, and they laugh and eat and pretend like a family. But at night someone knocks at the door, and Sarah freezes and her face turns white, and John stands up slowly and opens the door just a little. There is no one there, but something has been left on the ground, and it is a symbol burned into metal, and it glows red, and Sarah sees it and begins to cry. Without sound, John picks it up and asks, "What does it mean?" And she whispers only one word: "Hunted. Do not sleep." And in the morning, they change their names and move again, and this time, they do not speak to anyone, and Sarah says they will try again. But they must move fast that night. John wakes to the sound of metal breaking, and the door explodes, and he sees tall shadowy figures enter, and their eyes are burning with green light, and Sarah grabs John's arm and screams, "Protect the baby." And in that moment, John feels something deep inside him awaken, and he does not know why, but he runs toward the attackers. Instead of away, John runs forward and grabs a broken metal rod from the floor and swings it toward the tall shadowy figure, and the impact pushes the thing back, and Sarah pulls him toward a small exit at the back, and they run through smoke and sparks as the inn falls apart behind them. The attackers move fast but not fast enough, and Sira presses a button on her wrist and her ship lights up ahead like a beacon in the dark, and they jump inside and take off, just as the attackers shoot strange green fire that melts part of the engine. Cover John is shaking as he straps in, and Sira pilots with one hand while holding her stomach with the other, and her skin is pale silver and glowing faint blue like moonlight underwater, and John watches her and realizes he knows almost nothing about her. They reach orbit, and she sets course for a neutral moon called reshape, known for being a quiet refugee zone where no one asks questions, and no one answers them either. And John finally speaks and asks, "What was that, and who were they?" Sira breathes slowly and says they are bloodseekers, ancient warriors from a forgotten royal bloodline, and they want the child because of what he may become. And John says, "What do you mean may become?" And she says nothing more and closes her eyes. The silence in the ship is heavy and only broken by distant alerts from the damaged systems. And John looks at the small cabin and sees something strange in a corner where the wall panel flickers, and behind it lies a small glowing pod. He steps closer and opens it gently, and inside floats a small sphere, and it pulses with soft yellow light and seems to hum like it is alive. And before he can touch it, Sira snaps awake and says, "Do not ever touch that," and her voice is sharper than he has ever heard. John steps back and asks, "What is it?" And she says it is the future of the child, and nothing more. And John nods slowly, but he knows there is more to it than that, and maybe even more than she admits. When they reach Res 4, the sky is soft purple, and the cities are built into cliffs that rise like jagged bones, and here they blend in with other runaways and lost souls, and take a small room in a tower that overlooks a silver sea. Sira tells John to act normal and hold her hand in public and speak like a father and never look afraid, and John does what she says and begins to walk beside her, and sometimes he even forgets it is all a lie. They visit a doctor from an alien species that looks like stone and light, and during the checkup, the baby kicks and the lights flicker, and the doctor says softly, "This is not a normal child, and both of you must leave quickly because others will notice." Later that night, John watches Sira talk in a whisper to a small hologram, and the voice on the other end is harsh and speaks in a language John cannot understand, but he hears one word in common English, and that word is weapon. He does not ask and she does not explain, and for days they stay hidden and try to act like a small family, and John begins to feel strange whenever he looks at her, like he is a part of something bigger, and he starts caring, not just pretending. One day, a group of alien children play near their room, and one of them falls and screams, and John rushes out to help, but before he can reach her, the baby inside Sira glows through her skin, and the child floats into the air unharmed. Everyone sees and stares and whispers, and later that night someone knocks on their door, and this time, it is a woman with silver hair and 4 arms, and she smiles and says, "You are in danger, and you do not even know why." Sira lets her in, and they speak in private for a long time, and when she leaves, Sira tells John, "We must leave again, and this time to a place even farther and darker than before." And John says, "Why?" And she says, "Because your past is catching up." John is confused and asks, "What do you know about my past?" And she says, "You were not chosen by accident, and I knew who you were before I met you, and this lie we tell others is not the only lie between you." Sits on the floor and looks at the metal rod he used that night and sees strange markings appear on it now, like ancient writing glowing faint green, and he feels cold because he knows that rod was ordinary once, and now it is not. The next day, they leave Res 4 in silence and fly toward a system John has never heard of, and as the stars pass by, the baby glows again, and this time whispers a sound like a name, and it is a name John remembers from his dreams as a child. He does not tell Sira and just watches the stars and thinks maybe none of this is fake anymore, and maybe he was always meant to be here, not as a helper, not as a liar, but as something else. The ship flies into a silent part of space where no signals reach and no trade routes pass, and it is a place with no name, only numbers on old forgotten maps, and Sira sets the coordinates without looking, and John knows she has been here before. The stars around them shine faint like tired eyes watching from far away, and the only sound is the soft hum of the engine and the quiet breathing of Sira, who no longer looks calm but tense like a thread pulled too tight ready to snap. John sits near the back watching the baby's glow pulse slowly under Sira's skin, and he tries to pretend everything is fine, but his hands shake, and his mind echoes with that word the baby spoke, a word he still cannot forget and yet cannot explain. He begins to wonder if he ever had control over his choices, or if he was being guided all along by something older than fate, and the thought frightens him more than any hunter or weapon. Suddenly the ship's lights flicker, and Sira jumps up and says, "We are not alone," and before she finishes the radar screen turns red and a dark shape appears behind them, moving fast with no signal, no ID, and no lights, only a shadow that eats stars. John rushes to the control panel and says, "Is it the Blood Seekers?" And Sira shakes her head and says, "No, this is something worse, something older," and she calls it by a name that sounds like broken stone and lost time. "The Hunter of Stars." She says he is not part of any family or kingdom. He is alone, a relic of war. Once loyal to kings, now loyal to none. He follows only prophecy and kills without noise or reason. And if he is here, then the baby is no longer hidden. John asks why us, and Sira finally tells the truth, that long ago the galaxy was ruled by 13 bloodlines, each with a gift and a curse, and one of them fell in love with a human, and that human was not erased, but hidden on Earth. That bloodline broke their laws and hid their child in time, and now the baby is the last mix of those two worlds. The spark that can start a war or end it forever. And John realizes the truth, the reason he was chosen, the reason his dreams held strange voices. He is not just a pretend father, he is part of the story, part of the prophecy. And the baby is not just hers but his too, not by blood, maybe, but by something deeper, by fate or by design. Hunter moves closer, and they have no weapon strong enough to stop it. And Sira says we must reach the grave world before it finds us, and John asks what is there. And she says a secret, a code and a key hidden in a place even kings fear, as the ship dives into a hidden gate. Hunter fires and the ship shudders and sparks fly, and part of the control panel explodes, and John covers Sira as fire bursts near them, but the baby glows again, and the flames stop in mid-air like frozen water. They crash land on a cold black planet, filled with stone towers and empty air, and the silence here is not peaceful, it is heavy, like a warning, like the world itself wants them gone. And as they step out, the baby's glow gets stronger. Sira leads John to a cave under the largest tower, and inside the walls are covered with symbols that match the ones on the rod he used back in the inn, and John touches them, and they light up and show visions of ancient battles and broken thrones. They walk deeper and find a room filled with floating stones, and in the center a pedestal with a small glass orb, and Sira says, "This is it, the key to the vault, the place where the truth is kept, and only the baby and the father can open it." John hesitates and says, "I am not the real father," and Sira looks at him and says, "Maybe not in blood, but in bond, yes." And she places his hand on the orb, and places her other hand on her stomach, and the light begins to rise around them like smoke. Orb breaks and reveals a map and a message that says the child must survive, or the stars will fall, and John sees his own face carved on the wall beside a figure with glowing eyes, and a child in their arms, and he understands this was always his path above the cave. The hunter lands, and its feet crack the stone, and its eyes glow white like dead stars, and it does not speak, only listens and waits, and when it senses the light below, it draws a blade made of old metal and starts walking forward. Sira looks at John and says, "You must leave with the child, and I will stop him." And John says, "No, we do this together." And she says, "No, only you can take the next step, because the map is in your blood, and your past is not forgotten. It is calling now." She gives him the orb piece and a small device, and kisses his forehead, and says, "Protect him no matter what." And John wants to argue, but the baby glows so bright it lights the whole cave, and Sira pushes them into a side tunnel and seals it with her last power. As John runs with the child in his arms and the cave shakes, he hears one last sound behind him, the clash of blade and light and the scream of something not human. Not mortal but ancient and full of rage, and he knows this is only the beginning. John runs through the narrow tunnel with the child in his arms, and the walls close in like breathing stone, and behind him, the ground shakes with every step of the hunter, and the cave groans like it remembers pain from long ago and wants to bury it again. Does not know how deep the tunnel goes or where it leads, only that Sira sealed the entrance and he cannot turn back, and the baby is glowing again, not just with light but with warmth like fire that does not burn, and John holds him tighter and keeps moving. He reaches a split in the path and chooses the left without thinking, and the tunnel opens into a chamber full of light and floating crystals, and in the center there is a machine made of stone and metal, spinning slowly like a heart that never stops beating. The machine speaks without sound, and the crystals show images from long ago, and John sees flashes of cities in the sky, ships shaped like wings and towers built inside stars, and then he sees something stranger, a boy who looks just like him standing beside an alien queen. He steps forward and the crystals react, and a voice echoes in his mind saying, "Welcome back, lost blood," and John feels cold because he never knew any of this, never dreamed it could be real, and yet his name is carved into the floor in a language he cannot read, but somehow understands. The machine says his Zien carries the mark of the 13th line, the hidden one, the human thread in a royal tapestry, and the child in his arms is not just part of prophecy, but part of his own past, a future written long before he was born. John touches the crystal wall, and it shows him more. It shows Earth during its early days, watched by ships in secret, and shows a woman who looks like Sira holding a baby beside a human man with eyes full of fire, and John realizes this is not the first time this has happened. The child begins to hum, and the chamber shifts, revealing a hidden stair below the machine, and John takes it and finds a room with walls of memory, and in the center a pod containing another version of the weapon. The same sphere he saw in Sira's ship, but larger, more alive. The voice speaks again, saying, "You were never meant to be ordinary. You were placed on Earth for protection. Your blood was erased from records. Your past was sealed, and the day would come when you must choose between truth and safety, between self and sacrifice." He hears footsteps behind and turns, but sees nothing, only shadows moving, and he grabs the weapon and runs up the stair and back into the tunnel, and suddenly a door opens above him, revealing a sky filled with storm and lightning and a city floating above a sea of clouds. He steps out and finds himself on a platform high in the air, with ships flying around and strange creatures walking below, and no one notices him because this is a free world, a place where no law rules and everything is for sale, even secrets. John blends in and takes a lift down and finds a contact. Sira once mentioned a cybernetic doctor named Narek who works with no questions and fewer morals, and Narek looks at the baby and says, "This child is changing fast, faster than anything I have seen." John asks, "What do you mean?" and Narek scans the child and shows data full of strange symbols and says this baby is learning the universe by instinct, absorbing languages, signals, emotions, even gravity, and soon he will outgrow this world. Narek also scans John and his face changes, and he says, "You are not just human, you have dormant code inside. You code that should have been lost ages ago. And it is waking up because of the child, and maybe because of her." John leaves with more questions than answers and walks into the neon streets where voices speak in 100 tongues, and he remembers Sira's face, her fear, her strength, and her promise that the truth would come with pain but also with purpose. He sits in a quiet corner and looks at the weapon, the orb pulsing slowly in his bag and the baby sleeping in his arm, and he thinks about what it means to be chosen and whether it was ever a choice at Allah's. Night falls. He receives a message on a stolen device, a voice disguised but familiar saying she is alive but captured, and the hunter has taken her to the throne of echoes, the lost hall of kings where no living being has walked in 1,000 years. The voice says only you can enter, only you can survive it, only you carry both lines, and only the child can unlock the gate, but the gate comes at a cost, and the cost is written in blood. John stands up and feels something burn inside his chest. Not fear, not anger, but resolve like stone beneath fire, and he says to the night, I am done running, and I will bring her back, and I will finish what they started. He walks back to Narek and says, prepare my ship and set course for the throne of echoes, and Narek stares at him and says, no one goes there, and John replies, I am not no one, I am what they made me, and now I remember who I am. And in the sky above, the storm begins to move as if listening. The ship tears through space with a soundless roar, engines burning blue across the void, and John stands at the front watching the stars blur into long rivers of light, and the baby, now wrapped in strange cloth, glows quietly on the seat behind him as if waiting. Narek sets the course with a shaking hand and says, if you go there, you will not return. The throne of echoes eats the minds of all who enter, and even ghosts fear its halls, and John simply says that I will go without fear, and the child will lead the way behind them. The trail is quiet, no hunter, no shadow yet, but John knows the silence is a lie, and danger never travels far behind truth. And as they break through the final gate, the stars vanish, and a planet appears, not black, not red, but white like a frozen scream. The surface is smooth and flat, with towers rising like broken teeth in a storm, circling above like a crown, and Narek refuses to land and leaves the ship in orbit. And John takes his small pod down alone with the child in his arms and the orb pulsing softly at his side. Throne of Echoes stands at the heart of the dead city, surrounded by mirrors taller than mountains, and each mirror shows not reflection but memory, and as John walks between them, he sees moments from his life, his failures, his doubts, his pain, all playing like shadows on glass. Does not stop because the baby hums again, and the mirrors begin to crack as if rejecting his past and accepting something new, and the orb starts to float and spin faster, and its light shines into the ground, revealing a staircase made of living metal. He walks down, and each step feels heavier, like the air itself is pressing against his skin, and the walls whisper names not his, but somehow known. And then he sees it, a giant chamber made of glass and stone, and in the center a throne carved from bone and crystalline. The throne sits a figure wrapped in chains made of starlight, its face hidden, but its voice loud inside John's mind, saying, welcome, bearer of the forgotten line, welcome, blood of two worlds, welcome, key to the silence. John asks, where is she, where is Sira? And the figure lifts a hand and the walls open, revealing her floating in a cage of light, eyes closed, body still but not dead. And John steps forward, but the figure speaks again, saying, not yet, first you must remember. Orb floats from John's hand and enters the center of the chamber, and the ground lights up, showing ancient patterns, and then from the walls 100 faces appear, watching, speaking not with mouths, but with memory, and they say, we are the council lost to time, and you are our echo. They show him Earth long ago, before its rise, before history, when it was used as a vault, a shelter, a seed planted in dirt and protected by silence. And they say you were born of human shell and royal spark, and hidden in plain sight. Sira knew your truth and brought the child to you, not by chance but by design. And the moment you touched his name awakened, and your path began to burn again. And now you must decide truth or silence, life or escape, power or peace. John looks at Sira and says, I choose life and truth. And the baby floats from his arms, glowing brighter than ever, and the orb and the child touch, and everything in the chamber shatters into light. And suddenly, they are not in a chamber, but in a field of stars, surrounded by voices. The voices say your blood remembers, and your child remembers, and the two of you can end the cycle or begin it again, and only your choice will break the pattern, and the pattern has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. John reaches for Sira, and the chains vanish, and she falls into his arms, eyes opening slowly, and she says, I am sorry I never told you. But I was afraid. And he says, I understand now. I know why you ran and why you found me. and why none of this was chance. Stars fade and they are back in the chamber, and the throne is empty, and the baby now speaks clearly and says the hunter is coming and we must leave. And John looks at Sira and sees in her eyes the same fire that he feels in his heart. They rise from the chamber, and the mirrors outside now show new images, not of past but of future, a galaxy where the child stands on mountain, and behind him thousands follow, and in his hand the orb glows like a new sun. Ship above sends a signal saying a massive force approaches, and John says, "Let them come, we are ready," and he steps onto the pod with Sira and the child, and as they rise he feels the throne vanish behind them, not destroyed but hidden again, waiting in orbit. Narek stares at them with wide eyes and says, "I saw something when you were down there, something old, something watching," and John says yes, and it is watching still, and it knows we are not afraid anymore. As they fly away, the storm on the planet fades, and a single beam of light shoots into space like a signal, and far across the stars, something answers, not a voice, not a ship, but a presence. And John knows the final part of this journey is beginning, and the stars wait. Stars above them twist into sharp lines as the ship breaks from orbit and moves fast through the dark with no time left and no safe place ahead. John stands near the front, watching the long shadows of enemy ships appear on the radar one by one like teeth forming a jaw. Sira holds the child close as the orb pulses brighter and faster than ever, now reacting to something they cannot yet see, and Narek shouts from the back, saying this is not a normal fleet. This is a royal purge wave, the kind sent only to erase, not to capture, and they are already inside the system. The baby speaks again, not in words but in pulses, and the ship turns without input as if it hears him, and the path ahead lights up with strange symbols only visible through the ship's cracked sensors. And Sira says, "It is a forgotten route, an escape. Vein buried in old royal maps." John takes control and follows the course while behind them the hunter's signal returns stronger than before, like thunder under skin, and the crew can feel it now, not just as fear but as pressure in the bones, as if the air is folding inward. They pass through a field of shattered moons, each spinning slowly in silence, their pieces held together by magnetic wounds, and between them ancient machines drift dead but still humming as if they remember purpose. And John says we must keep moving, they are too close. Sira nods and activates a cloaking field stolen from the throne itself, and for a moment they vanish from the scans of their enemies and hide behind a broken ring of ice around a cold planet with no name and no orbit, only drift inside the ship. The orb glows until the walls seem to breathe with light, and the baby now begins to float weightless and speaks clearly for the first time, saying the time is near. The key must be placed, the gate must open, and I must walk alone. John steps forward and says, "What gate?" and the orb expands, showing a map that ends not in space but in Earth, and Sira gasps and says it was Earth all along, the beginning and the end both, and the gate lies beneath the forgotten ice where the first vault was built. Narek says that cannot be. The original vault was destroyed in the silent wars, and John replies no, it was buried by design, hidden by ancestors who knew this day would come, and now the child must return to the place where blood was first mixed. They set course for Earth, and as they near the system they see the fleet ahead waiting, already spread like a web, and the hunter at the center, silent, unmoving, watching and waiting. And John says we do not fight them. Not here, not now. Sira agrees, and they fly close to a solar storm on the edge of the system and ride the static wave, using the cloak to mask their energy, and for a moment everything goes dark inside the ship as they drift blind through heat and light that could burn planets. When the systems return, they are past the line, and Earth is before them, green and blue and still as quiet as the day. John left, and they land not in any known city but on an ancient continent where snow falls on ruins older than maps and wind carries voices from the past. John steps out, holding the child, and the orb leads them to a deep canyon where symbols shine through the ice. In the moment the baby touches the ground, the ice melts in a circle around them, revealing a staircase leading below into firelit tunnels. They walk down And the air grows warm, heavy with memory, and the walls show carvings of humans with stars for eyes and aliens, kneeling beside them offering gifts and blood and peace and war. And John realizes Earth was never just a planet, it was a bridge, a design. A secret kept alive by stories. They reach the final chamber, and there stands a gate made not of stone or metal, but of time itself, shimmering like a reflection that never ends, and the child steps forward alone, holding the orb, which now splits into 3 pieces and floats around him, forming a ring of light. John tries to follow, but the light pushes him back gently, and the baby turns and says, "I was never just yours. I was always theirs and yours and mine, and this is what I was made. To do, not to destroy, not to rule, but to unlock." The gate opens slowly, and light pours out, showing nothing and everything, stars and voices and futures, unwritten. And at that moment, the hunter appears behind them inside the chamber, not as shadow now, but as flesh wrapped in armor that screams, and it speaks for the first time. It says, "Step away, or the child dies." And John steps forward with no weapon, no shield, only a voice, and says, "I have seen who I am, and I am not afraid." And Sira stands beside him and says, "I was born in exile, but I rise in truth." And the child says, "I do not fear death, because I am the next beginning." Hunter strikes, but the gate pulls him in like water, breaking a rock, and the chamber cracks and the gate collapses, and the orb explodes in light, and when it fades, the child is gone, and so is the hunter, and only silence remains. John falls to his knees, not in sorrow, but in awe, and Sira joins him, and they hold each other, knowing this was not the end, but the moment between pages, and the page yet to be written is waiting on the other side of light, and somewhere beyond stars. The child walks alone into what comes next. The stars do not speak, but they listen, and now they listen to silence, a deep silence, left behind after the gate closed, and the light faded, and the child walked into something not known, not mapped, not named, and only felt. John stands in the ruins of the vault with Sira by his side, the stone walls glowing faint with the last touch of the child's energy, and he hears nothing now, not from the orb, not from the stars, not even from his own heartbeat, which feels quiet for the first time in years. He looks at the sky and wonders where the child has gone and what waits beyond a gate made of time and choice, and if he will ever see that small glowing smile again, or hear that soft voice speak his name like it was always meant to. Sira walks beside him with slow steps, her hand brushing the wall as if it might answer her grief with warmth, and the ice around them starts to return as nature reclaims what was opened, and the chamber begins to seal, not by force, but by purpose. They climb the stair back to the surface, and the snow falls heavier now, each flake like a memory, each breath like a promise, and the wind carries no sound from ships or enemies or hunters, only peace and the quiet hush of something complete in orbit. Narek waits, watching the planet from above, and when their signal returns, he opens the gate and lets them board, and says nothing, only nods and hands them warm cloth and water. And John sees in his eyes that he too felt something change across the stars. The ship moves away slowly, not running, not escaping, only leaving gently like turning a page, and Earth grows small behind them, not forgotten but fulfilled. And John looks at the old blue world and whispers, "Thank you for hiding us. Thank you for starting us." They drift through space with no destination, no mission, and no orders, and for the first time, John feels free, not the freedom of floating lost, but the freedom of knowing why he existed, and what he gave, and what he carries now in silence. Sira sits near the observation glass, eyes closed, fingers wrapped around the last piece of the orb, now cracked but still warm, and she speaks without sound, saying his name again and again, as if the stars might echo it back. Weeks pass, or maybe days, or maybe years, because time no longer moves the same way after touching what lies beyond, and the universe does not rush them, because it too is watching, waiting, wondering what will grow from this silence. Then one day a signal arrives, soft and impossible, made of color and emotion instead of sound, and it enters the ship not through machines, but through memory, and John sees it not with his eyes but with his soul. He sees a world made of light shaped like music, where thoughts build cities and dreams take flight, and the child walks there no longer. A baby no longer needing hands to guide him, and around him move beings of wonder and power who smile as he speaks. He says, I am not lost, I am not gone. I am not alone, I am becoming, and I carry your names and your choices. And I remember love, I remember fire. I remember running through stars, and I will build a path back to you when the time is right. The signal fades and John stands still, hand on the window as if trying to touch that distant light, and Sierra walks to him. And they do not cry, they do not speak, they only lean into each other and feel the truth settle in like dawn. A wreck sets a new course, not toward any empire or station or kingdom, but toward a new frontier where no maps exist and no laws matter. And he says, maybe it is time we find our own place. Maybe it is time we write new stories, not of war, not of prophecy, but of peace. The ship hums softly as it glides between stars, and John watches them pass, knowing now that each one is not just fire and gas, but a watcher, a listener, a keeper of paths, and perhaps one day a doorway to where the child waits. He walks to the console and enters a message, not for Earth, not for any council, but for whoever finds it someday. And he says, once I was a man without purpose, once I was paid to pretend, once I lied and ran and fought and feared. But then I met her, and then I met him, and I remembered what it means to stand and protect and believe. And now I know I was never pretending. I was never just a helper. I was always meant to love and lead and let go. And if you ever feel lost, if you ever feel small, remember this. You do not need to be chosen. You only need to choose. You only need to act when it matters, and the stars will find you when you are ready. He sends the message, and it travels outward without direction, and maybe it will never be heard, or maybe it already has. And he returns to Sierra, and they sit together as the stars continue their endless dance around them, quiet and bright and eternal. And somewhere beyond light, beyond gravity, beyond time, a boy walks through wonders and remembers two faces, not because they were gods or warriors, but because they loved him, chose him, and gave everything so he could be more than what they were. And the galaxy waits, not in fear, not in silence, but in hope.